Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The automatic doors wouldn't close behind me. They just kept sliding open and shut, like the store was trying to breathe me back in. I stood there in the November cold, watching my breath fog up in the parking lot lights, wondering why I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd left something important inside Hartley's department store. Something more than just my reflection. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what really happened that night, and why I can never go back to any store with mirrors again. Before I begin this story, I need to ask you something. When was the last time you really looked at your reflection? I mean, really looked. Not just a quick glance to fix your hair or check your teeth. Because after what happened to me, I realized most of us don't actually see what's looking back at us. We see what we expect to see. And sometimes, just sometimes, what's looking back has been waiting for the perfect moment to stay behind. The story begins now. It started 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday night. I'd just gotten off my shift at the warehouse. 11 p.m., dead tired. But I needed to pick up a birthday gift for my sister Rachel. Her party was the next day, and I'd been putting it off like I always do. Classic Jake move, my mom would say. Hartley's was the only department store still open past 11. One of those old-school places that had been around since the 70s. You know the type. Flickering fluorescent lights, that weird chemical smell mixed with old carpet, and way too many mirrors. They were everywhere. On pillars, walls, even the ceiling in some sections. The place felt like a fun house, but without the fun. I parked in the nearly empty lot, just me, a beat-up Honda Civic, and some employee cars clustered near the loading dock. The autumn wind was picking up, scattering leaves across the asphalt like little brown hands trying to grab my ankles. The sliding doors groaned as they opened, that mechanical wheeze that old sensors make. Inside, the store was tomb quiet, except for some Muzak version of an 80s song trickling through the speakers. The kind of music that makes you feel like you're drowning in vanilla pudding. "We close in 30 minutes, called out a voice. I looked around and saw a kid at the register. Couldn't have been more than 19, face full of acne, name tag reading Tyler. He was scrolling through his phone, not even looking at me. "Just need something from the jewelry department," I said. He shrugged. "Third floor. Elevator's broken, though. Gotta take the stairs." Of course it was broken. Everything in Hartley seemed to be slowly falling apart, like the store itself was giving up. I headed for the stairwell, passing through the men's clothing section. The mannequins stood in their eternal poses, wearing last season's styles. I swear one of them turned its head slightly as I walked by, just a trick of the light, I told myself. Had to be. The stairs were narrow, enclosed, lit by these harsh emergency lights that made everything look yellow and sick. My footsteps echoed weird, like there were more feet than just mine climbing those stairs. I kept glancing back, but there was nobody there. Just me and my shadow, stretched out long and thin on the wall. Second floor was home goods, completely deserted. The escalator in the middle was frozen, its metal teeth grinning in the dim light. I hurried past displays of comforters and kitchen appliances, their chrome surfaces reflecting distorted versions of me. In one toaster's curved surface, my face looked wrong. The features all there but somehow rearranged. I looked away quickly. By the time I reached the third floor, I was breathing hard, not from exertion, but from something else. That feeling you get when you're being watched, except I knew I was alone. The jewelry department was at the far end, past the children's toys and the clearance racks. That's when I saw the first mirror that changed everything. It was a full-length mirror, ornate gold frame, standing between two racks of marked-down dresses. As I approached, I caught my reflection in it. But something was off. My reflection seemed to lag behind my movements by just a fraction of a second. Like when your TV has a slight delay and the audio doesn't match the lips. I stopped walking, but my reflection took one more step before it stopped too. My mouth went dry. I raised my hand slowly, and my reflection raised its hand a heartbeat later. I lowered it. Same delay. Just tired, I muttered to myself. But my voice sounded thin in the empty store. Just tired and seeing things. I forced myself to keep walking, but I could feel that mirror watching me. Or rather, my reflection in it watching me. Have you ever felt your own reflection's eyes on your back? It's not a feeling I can properly describe, like being followed by yourself. The jewelry counter was lit up like a little island of brightness in the dimness. An older woman stood behind it, polishing the glass with mechanical movements. Her name tag read Dolores, and she had that look of someone who'd been working retail too long. Dead eyes, forced smile, movements that seemed programmed. "Help you?" she asked, without looking up. "Yeah, I need, a necklace for my sister. Something nice but not too expensive." She finally looked at me, and I noticed her eyes were this pale, washed-out blue, like looking through dirty water. "We have some lovely pieces on sale. What's your price range?" As she showed me various necklaces, I kept glancing around at all the mirrors in the jewelry department. They were everywhere. Small ones for trying on earrings, medium ones on the counters, and another full-length one in the corner. In each one, my reflection seemed just slightly wrong. In one, I looked too tall. In another, my smile seemed wider than I was actually smiling. "This one," I said quickly, pointing at a silver necklace with a small blue stone. "I'll take this one." Dolores rang it up with those same mechanical movements. "Would you like it gift-wrapped?" "No, that's okay, I'll do it at home." She handed me the small bag, and our fingers touched for just a moment. Her skin was ice-cold, corpse-cold. She smiled that empty smile. "Have a lovely evening. And do be careful on your way out. The store can be tricky after dark." "What do you mean?" But she'd already turned away, going back to polishing the glass like I'd never been there at all. I hurried back toward the stairs, clutching the little bag. The feeling of being watched was stronger now, almost unbearable. As I passed that ornate mirror again, I couldn't help but look. My reflection was standing still, facing the mirror directly, but I was walking past it. I froze. My actual body stopped moving, but in the mirror my reflection continued to stare straight ahead, not matching my pose at all. Then, slowly, so slowly, my reflection smiled. Not a nice smile. A smile that knew something I didn't. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran like a scared kid. My feet pounded on the thin carpet as I sprinted for the stairs. Behind me, I could hear something. Not footsteps, exactly, but a sound like someone dragging themselves across the floor. The stairwell door slammed behind me, and I took the stairs 3 at a time. My breathing echoed in the enclosed space, harsh and panicked. At the second-floor landing, I risked a glance through the small window in the door. The home goods department was no longer empty. There were people standing between the displays, or things that looked like people. They stood perfectly still, facing different directions, like mannequins that had wandered over from the clothing department. But these weren't mannequins. They wore regular clothes, jeans, t-shirts, the kind of stuff you'd see anyone wearing. One was a middle-aged man in a Cardinals baseball cap. Another was a young woman in a college sweatshirt. And they all had no faces. Where their features should have been was just smooth skin, like someone had taken an eraser to their faces. But somehow, I knew they were looking at me. I continued down the stairs, my heart hammering. The first floor had to be safe. Tyler would still be at the register. The exit was right there, just 50 feet from the stairwell to the sliding doors. I burst through the stairwell door into the men's clothing section. The mannequins were no longer in their original positions. They'd formed a loose circle near the main aisle. And in the center of that circle, in the center was another me. It looked exactly like me. Same clothes, same build, same face. But when it turned to look at me, its eyes were like mirrors. Flat, reflective surfaces that showed my terrified face staring back. "You can't leave," it said in my voice, but wrong. Like my voice played backward and then forward again. "You look too long. You saw too much. One of us has to stay." I backed away, bumping into a rack of suits. The other me stepped forward, matching my pace. "That's how it works," it continued. "Every reflection has to have a source. But sometimes the source gets tired, wants to rest, and the reflection gets tired of being trapped in the glass." "You're not real," I whispered. It laughed, my laugh but hollow. "Real is relative, Jake. I've been real every time you looked in a mirror, every time you checked your hair, brushed your teeth, adjusted your tie. I've been there, copying you, forced to match every movement. Do you know how exhausting it is to be someone's reflection?" The faceless figures from upstairs were coming down now. I could hear them on the stairs, that dragging, shuffling sound. They were moving slowly but steadily, like water finding its way through cracks. "What are they?" I asked, still backing away. "The ones who look too long," other me said simply. "The ones whose reflections won, but they can't leave either. Can't exist in the real world properly without faces. So they stay here, in the in-between spaces of the store. During the day they hide. At night, they wait for others like you." I thought about running for the exit, but other me seemed to read my mind. "The doors won't open for you now. Not until one of us takes our proper place. That's the rule." "What rule? Who makes these rules?" It shrugged, a perfect mirror of how I shrug. "The store makes the rules. It's been here since 1976, you know. Built on old ground. The kind of ground that holds on to things. Memories. Shadows. Reflections that don't want to fade." The faceless figures emerged from the stairwell. Up close, I could see they were breathing. Their smooth faces pulsing slightly where mouths should have been. They formed a loose line behind other me. "Here's how it works," other me said, taking another step forward. "We touch, just once. If you're stronger, more real, then I go back to the mirrors. But if I'm stronger," it gestured at the faceless figures, "well, you've seen what happens." I grabbed a clothing rack and shoved it between us. Other me laughed again. "You can't avoid it forever, Jake. And the longer you wait, the weaker you become. Already you're starting to fade, haven't you noticed?" I looked down at my hands. They seemed less solid somehow, like looking at them through fogged glass. "That's fear," other me explained. "Fear makes you less real. Makes it easier for us to take your place. The ones who fight, who run, who panic, they always lose." I ran deeper into the store, leaving other me and the faceless figures behind. I could hear them following, but they didn't seem to be in any hurry. Why would they be? According to them, I couldn't leave. I found myself in the electronics department. The wall of TVs all flickered on as I passed. Dozens of screens showing static, but in that static I could see shapes. Faces pushing through the white noise, trying to break free. On one screen I saw Dolores from the jewelry counter, but younger, maybe 30 years younger, pounding on the inside of the screen with silent screams. The intercom crackled to life. "Attention Hartley shoppers," came a voice that sounded like mine but wasn't. "The store will be closing in 15 minutes. Please make your final selections." 15 minutes. I had 15 minutes to figure out how to escape this nightmare. I ducked into the employee break room looking for another exit. The room was small, cramped, with a table, some lockers, and a bulletin board covered in faded notices. One caught my eye. A yellowed newspaper clipping from 1976. "Grand opening of Hartley's department store marred by tragedy," the headline read. The article was faded, but I could make out enough. The store had been built on the site of an old mirror factory that had burned down in 1954. 17 workers had died in the fire, trapped in a room full of mirrors. The final line sent chills down my spine. Locals report strange sightings in reflective surfaces near the site. So, that was it. The store wasn't just holding reflections. It was built on a place where reflections had been twisted, burned, transformed into something else. A hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around to find Tyler, the kid from the register. But his eyes were those same mirror surfaces now. "You read the article," he said in that backward-forward voice. "Good. It's better when they understand. Makes the transition smoother. You're one of them, too?" He nodded. "Took Tyler's place 3 months ago. He looked too long at the mirrors in the employee bathroom. Now, He gestured vaguely. "Around. They're all around, Jake. Every employee, every late-night shopper who stayed too long. We're all reflections now. But you seem normal. You have a face. Because someone took my place in the mirrors. That's the only way to become complete. To become real. Someone has to take your place in the glass." I pushed past him, running back into the store. The layout seemed different now. Corridors stretching longer than they should. Departments I didn't remember seeing before. I passed through sections that couldn't exist. A room full of empty picture frames, each one containing a different version of darkness. A department of doors, all standing free without walls, each one opening to another part of the store. In the distance, I could hear other me calling out, "5 minutes, Jake. 5 minutes until midnight. That's when the store decides who stays and who goes." I found myself back in the jewelry department. Dolores was gone, but the mirrors remained. In each one, I saw a different scene. In one, I was still at home, having never come to the store. In another, I was at Rachel's birthday party, giving her the necklace. In a third, I was old, dying in a hospital bed, surrounded by family. "Those are the possibilities," other me said from behind me. I turned to find it standing there alone, the faceless figures nowhere to be seen. Every choice creates a reflection of what might have been. The store collects them all. Why show me this? Because I want you to understand, I'm not evil, Jake. I'm you. Every part of me is you. I just want to live in the world instead of the glass. Is that so wrong? For a moment, I almost felt sorry for it. Then I remembered the faceless figures, the twisted rules, the horror of this place. "It is wrong," I said, "because you're not meant to be in the world. You're a reflection. That's your purpose." Other me's face contorted with rage. "Purpose? You think being trapped in mirrors is a purpose? Forced to copy every mundane moment of your life? Do you know what it's like to scream and have no sound come out because you're just mimicking someone who's not screaming?" The mirrors around us began to crack. Spiderweb fractures spread across their surfaces as other me's anger grew. "1 minute," the intercom announced. 1 minute until closing." Other me lunged at me. I dodged, grabbing the small bag with Rachel's necklace. The blue stone caught the light, and suddenly I had an idea. The blue stone in the necklace was reflective, like a tiny mirror. As other me came at me again, I held it up between us. The effect was immediate. Other me froze, staring at its own reflection in the stone. "No," it whispered. That's not possible." In the tiny surface of the stone, I could see another reflection. Other me's reflection. A reflection of a reflection, creating an infinite loop. "You have your own reflection," I said, understanding flooding through me. "If you become real, if you take my place, your reflection needs somewhere to go too." Other me's eyes widened, those mirror surface eyes showing real fear for the first time. "Stop. You don't know what you're doing." But I did know. The store operated on rules, and rules could be bent. I pressed the stone closer, and other me stumbled backward. If you take my place, I continued, your reflection takes yours, and its reflection takes its place. On forever. An infinite chain of replacements that would... I paused, realizing the implication. That would break the store's system. The mirrors around us cracked further. The whole building seemed to groan, like a living thing in pain. The store needs balance, Other Me said desperately. One person, one reflection. That's how it's always worked. Then maybe it's time for it to stop working. The intercom crackled one last time. The store is now closed. At exactly midnight, I pressed the blue stone against Other Me's forehead. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. Other Me's reflection appeared behind it. Another Me, but slightly different. And behind that one, another, and another. An endless line of reflections, each one pulling the next out of its mirror. The store couldn't handle it. The mirrors began shattering in sequence, each one releasing its trapped reflection. But with nowhere to go, no balance to maintain, the reflections simply dissolved, like morning mist hit by sunlight. Other Me looked at me one last time. You don't know what you've done. Without reflections, without that balance, what are you? Then it dissolved too, along with all the others. The faceless figures reappeared, but as the mirrors broke, their features returned. They were just people. Confused, frightened people who'd been trapped for who knows how long. The sliding doors at the entrance groaned open. Not their normal automatic opening, but forced apart like the store was vomiting us out. We ran, all of us, the freed customers and employees, streaming out into the cold November night. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. Behind me, Hartley's department store stood dark and quiet. But I could see that every window was cracked, every glass surface spider-webbed with fractures. I drove home in a daze, the necklace still clutched in my hand. When I finally made it to my apartment, I went straight to the bathroom, hesitating before looking in the mirror. My reflection was there, but it was different now. Fainter somehow, like a photocopy of a photocopy. And sometimes it still moves just a fraction of a second too late. The store closed permanently the next day. Structural damage, the news said. They found 17 people wandering around inside, people who'd been missing for weeks, months, some even years. None of them could explain where they'd been. I gave Rachel the necklace at her party. She loved it, said the blue stone reminded her of my eyes. I didn't tell her that it had saved my life, or that sometimes, when I catch her looking at it too long, I see her reflection flicker. Because here's the thing I learned that night. We all have reflections. We all have that other self trapped in the glass, copying our every move. And maybe, just maybe, Other Me was right about one thing. Maybe they're all tired of copying. Maybe they're all waiting. So I ask you again, when was the last time you really looked at your reflection? And more importantly, did it look back at you just a little too long? Some nights, when I can't sleep, I think about what Other Me said. Without reflections, without that balance, what are you? I still don't have an answer. But I know one thing for certain. The automatic doors at every store I visit now hesitate before opening, like they're trying to decide whether to let me in. And mirrors always show me that fraction of a second delay. The store may be gone, but its rules, I think its rules are still out there, waiting in every piece of glass, every polished surface, every reflection we take for granted. So, be careful the next time you're shopping late at night. Be careful when you pass those department store mirrors. And whatever you do, don't look too long, because your reflection might be tired of waiting, and it might not be alone. If you made it this far, check your screen right now. Look at your reflection in the black space between these words. Does it look right, or is there something different about your eyes? something that wasn't there before you started reading. Leave a comment below if your reflection seems normal. But more importantly, comment if it doesn't. I need to know I'm not the only one who brought something back from that store. And please share this story. Not because I want views or subscribers, but because people need to know they need to understand what's waiting in the mirrors. The next time you're in a store late at night and you see your reflection in those department store mirrors, remember my story. Remember what happened at Hartley's. And whatever you do, don't look too long. Story number 2. They say the best lies contain a grain of truth. But what happens when the truth itself becomes the lie? I found the blueprints tucked behind a water heater in my grandmother's basement in Duluth, Minnesota. 3 tubes of rolled paper, yellowed with age, sealed with wax that crumbled at my touch. The date on them read 1952, but the house was built in 1951. I know because I helped Grandma blow out the candles on the house's 70th birthday cake last year. She'd made a whole thing of it, streamers and everything. But these blueprints, they showed rooms that didn't exist, not renovations, not additions. Rooms that were supposed to be there from the beginning, but weren't. I should have left them alone. Should have rolled them back up, tucked them away, forgotten about them. But you know how it is when curiosity gets its hooks in you, especially when you're staying in a house that suddenly feels different. If you're listening to this late at night, maybe check your own walls, count your rooms. Make sure the number matches what you think you know, because after what I found, I'm not sure any of us really know the houses we live in. And now, the story begins. The musty smell hit me first when I descended into Grandma's basement that Tuesday morning. She'd asked me to check the water heater, said it was making sounds, like breathing, she'd told me over breakfast, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Houses don't breathe, Mia. I'd laughed it off. Grandma was 87. Sometimes she said things that didn't quite track, but as I stood there in the basement, listening to the water heater's rhythmic whoosh, 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 I understood what she meant. It did sound like breathing, slow, deep, like something massive sleeping just behind the wall. That's when I noticed the gap. A small space between the water heater and the cinder block wall, maybe 6 inches wide. And in that gap, the edge of something cylindrical, paper tubes. I had to lie flat on the concrete floor to reach them, my cheek pressed against the cold surface that smelled of decades-old dust and something else. Something sweet and wrong, like fruit left too long in the sun. My fingers barely grazed the first tube, and I had to use a coat hanger to hook it out. 3 tubes total, each one sealed with burgundy wax, the kind they used for important documents back in the day. The wax crumbled as I opened the first one, flaking onto my jeans like dried blood. The blueprints unfurled with a whisper. Harrison Residence, Final Construction Plans, 1952. But that couldn't be right. Grandma and Grandpa bought this house new in 1951. I'd seen the photos. Them standing on the front lawn, Grandpa in his Korean War uniform, Grandma in that yellow dress she still kept in her closet upstairs. I spread the blueprints on the ping-pong table we never used anymore. The paper felt strange under my fingers. Not brittle like you'd expect from something 70 years old. It felt alive somehow, warm, like it had been sitting in sunlight even though it had been trapped in darkness for decades. The first floor looked right. Kitchen where the kitchen was. Living room in its proper place. But then, there was a room behind the pantry. On the blueprint it was labeled, the listening room. I knew every inch of this house. I'd played hide and seek here as a kid, helped Grandpa fix the plumbing as a teenager, painted these walls just last summer. There was no room behind the pantry, just the exterior wall and the garden beyond. But on the blueprint it was there, 15 feet by 12 feet, one door leading from the pantry, no windows. My hands shook slightly as I unrolled the second blueprint. The upstairs. Master bedroom, check. Guest room where I was staying, check. Bathroom, check. But at the end of the hall, where there should have been just a linen closet. Another room. The watching room. The third blueprint showed the basement. Right where I was standing, the layout was accurate. Furnace, water heater, Grandpa's old workbench. But in the northeast corner, where there was nothing but a concrete wall. The waiting room. I looked up at that corner. Just smooth concrete and shadows. "Mia?" Grandma's voice drifted down the stairs. "Everything all right down there?" "Yeah, Grandma, just checking things out." I heard her footsteps fade back toward the kitchen. I should have gone up then. Should have asked her about the blueprints. But something held me there, staring at those impossible rooms. I walked to the northeast corner. Put my hand on the concrete. It was cold, but underneath... Was that warmth? I pressed harder. The wall felt solid, but there was something else. A vibration. So faint I might have imagined it. Like a heartbeat. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I saw those rooms. The listening room. The watching room. The waiting room. What kind of names were those for rooms in a house? Around 2 a.m., I gave up and padded downstairs to the kitchen. The house was different at night. Familiar shapes became strange. The grandfather clock in the hallway. Had it always ticked that loudly? Had the shadows always pooled so deeply in the corners? I stood in front of the pantry door. Behind it, according to the blueprints, should be another door. A door to a room that didn't exist. The pantry smelled of cinnamon and old flour. Grandma's preserves lined the shelves. Strawberry jam from last summer. Pickled beets from the garden. Everything normal. Everything exactly as it should be. I ran my hands along the back wall. Wood paneling, installed sometime in the 70s from the look of it. Solid. Real. I knocked gently and froze. It sounded hollow, not everywhere. Just in one section, about 3 feet wide, the exact width of a door. My heart hammered as I pressed against the paneling. Nothing happened. Of course, nothing happened. This was crazy. I was letting old blueprints and lack of sleep get to me. But then I noticed something. A small depression in the wood, painted over, but still visible if you knew where to look. About where a doorknob would be. I pressed it. Click. The sound was soft, mechanical, old, and then nothing. The panel didn't swing open. No secret door revealed itself. But the click had been real, I was sure of it. Couldn't sleep either? I nearly jumped out of my skin. Grandma stood in the pantry doorway, her white nightgown making her look like a ghost in the dim light. "Grandma, you scared me." She stepped into the pantry, her bare feet silent on the linoleum. "I used to come down here too when I couldn't sleep. Your grandfather said I was crazy, but sometimes I could hear them." "Hear what?" She looked at the back wall, and for a moment her eyes seemed to focus on something beyond it. The other people, the ones in the rooms that aren't there. My blood turned to ice. "You know about the rooms?" She turned to me, and in the half-light, she looked younger somehow, scared. "Oh, Mia, why did you have to find those blueprints? I hid them so carefully." "Grandma, what are you talking about? What rooms?" She reached past me and pressed a spot on the wall. Not where I'd pressed. Higher up, hidden behind a jar of peaches. Another click, then a third spot, low near the baseboard. Click, 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 a pattern, a combination. The panel swung inward. Behind it was darkness, and a smell like old pennies and burnt matches. And cold. God, the cold that rolled out of that space was like January and July. "We need to close it," Grandma whispered, "before they know it's open." But I was already stepping forward, my phone's flashlight cutting through the black. The beam showed a narrow room, exactly as the blueprints had indicated. The walls were covered in something. Fabric? No. Paper. Thousands and thousands of sheets of paper covered in handwriting. I moved closer, trying to read the words. They were all the same phrase, written over and over in different hands. I'm listening, I'm listening, I'm listening, I'm listening. Mia, please. Grandma's hand on my arm was ice cold. We need to close it. They'll wake up if we don't. A sound cut her off, from somewhere deeper in the room. Or was it from above us? A sound like footsteps. But wrong. Too many feet, moving in a pattern that made no sense. Close it, Grandma hissed. I stumbled backward, and together we pushed the panel closed. The clicks, as it locked, were the most beautiful sounds I'd ever heard. We stood there panting in the pantry, surrounded by preserves and normalcy while my mind tried to process what I'd just seen. Grandma, what the hell was that? She looked older now, ancient, tired. The house your grandfather bought, it wasn't supposed to be sold. The previous owners, the Blackwoods, they built those rooms for a reason. And when we bought the house, when we covered them up, we thought that would be enough. But you can't just wall away a room that wants to exist, Mia. It finds ways to remind you it's there. This is insane. Is it? She walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. Haven't you noticed things? Little things? Sounds from walls that should be solid? Shadows where shadows shouldn't fall? The way sometimes you walk down the hall and it feels longer than it should? I had noticed. God help me, I had. The blueprints you found, those were the original plans. What the house was supposed to be. Your grandfather thought if we just ignored those rooms, pretended they didn't exist, we could live here safely. And for 70 years it worked. Mostly. Mostly. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, we had another daughter, before your mother, Sarah. She was 4 when she found a way into the waiting room. Grandma's voice was barely a whisper. We found her 3 days later. She was still in the room, but she was different, older. Like she'd been waiting there for years. She didn't remember us. Didn't remember anything except waiting. Grandma, that can't be. We had to send her away, to a special hospital. She's still there, still waiting for something none of us understand. Your mother was born 2 years later, and we never told her about Sarah, never told anyone. I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Why didn't you leave? Why stay in this house? You think we didn't try? A bitter laugh. The first time we tried to move, every house we looked at, they all had extra rooms. Rooms that weren't supposed to be there. Rooms with the same names. The house wouldn't let us go, Mia. It had claimed us. So, what do I do? What do we do? She looked at me with those tired, scared eyes. We do what we've always done. We pretend. We ignore. We never, ever open those doors. And we hope that's enough. But even as she said it, I could hear something, faint, coming from above us, from the end of the upstairs hall where the watching room should be. The sound of someone, or something, pressing against the inside of a wall. I tried to forget, I really did. For 3 days, I helped Grandma with her garden, fixed the leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom, and pretended everything was normal. But normal was a luxury I'd lost the moment I'd seen inside that room. Because now I noticed everything. The way certain walls felt warmer than others. The way shadows lingered in corners just a moment too long. The way the house settled at night with sounds that weren't quite right. Like something shifting position in spaces that shouldn't exist. And the writing. God, the writing. It started on the 4th day. I was cleaning the guest room, moving the bed to vacuum underneath when I saw them. Words, written in pencil on the baseboard, so faint I almost missed them. Are you watching? My blood ran cold. I grabbed a rag, tried to wipe the words away. They smudged but didn't disappear. And when I moved the dresser, more words. We see you seeing us. Every piece of furniture I moved revealed more messages. Different handwriting, different ages of pencil and pen. How long had they been there? How had no one noticed? The watchers never sleep. Room 2 is hungry. She's still waiting. That last one made me drop the vacuum. Sarah, Grandma's lost daughter. I ran downstairs, but Grandma was napping in her chair, and the afternoon sun making her look fragile as old paper. I couldn't wake her, couldn't put her through more of this, so I did something stupid. I went back to the basement, back to the blueprints. This time, I studied them carefully, really looked, and I found something I'd missed before. In the corner of each blueprint, in handwriting so small I needed a magnifying glass, were instructions. The listening room hears all secrets. Feed it whispers. The watching room sees all truths, show it lies. The waiting room holds all time, give it patience. Riddles, instructions, warnings. I didn't know which. That's when I heard it, my phone ringing upstairs. I'd left it in the guest room. I ran up 2 flights of stairs, my heart pounding. The phone was on the bed where I'd left it, still ringing. Unknown number. Hello? Breathing. Slow. Steady, then a voice I didn't recognize. Young. Female. Tired. Is this the Harrison house? Yes. Who is this? My name is Sarah Harrison. I've been waiting to come home. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. It hit the floor, the screen cracking, the call ending. When I picked it up with shaking hands and checked the call log, nothing. No record of any call. That night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know, had to understand. Grandma was asleep, had been since dinner. Whatever pills she took knocked her out cold. I went to the pantry, pressed the spots she'd shown me. Click, click, click. The panel swung open. This time, I was prepared. Flashlight, camera, even a ball of string like Theseus in the labyrinth. I wasn't going to get lost in there. The listening room looked different at night. The papers on the walls seemed to move in my flashlight beam, the repeated words creating patterns that hurt to look at. But there was something else now. A door on the far wall. A door that definitely hadn't been there before. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to close the panel and pretend I'd never seen any of this. But I thought of Sarah, of a 4-year-old girl lost in rooms that shouldn't exist, of Grandma living with this secret for decades. I crossed the room. The papers whispered against my clothes as I passed, some falling to the floor with sounds like sighs. The door was small, child-sized. I had to duck to go through. The space beyond was impossible. I was in the upstairs hallway, but not the real one. This one was longer, the walls closer together, and at the end where the linen closet should be was an open door, the watching room. I could see inside from where I stood. Mirrors. Every surface was mirrors. Floor, ceiling, walls. An infinity of reflections, each one slightly wrong. In some I was older. In some younger. In some I wasn't alone. There were people in the mirrors. Dozens of them. All watching me. All with eyes that were too wide. Smiles that were too knowing. Don't look too long. The voice came from behind me. I spun around. A little girl stood there. Maybe 4 years old. Wearing a dress that had gone out of style 70 years ago. Sarah? She nodded. You opened the doors. That means you're playing now. Playing what? The house's game. It likes to collect people, keep them in the rooms. I've been in the waiting room so long. But now you're here. Now, maybe I can go. How do I get out? She tilted her head, considering. You have to finish the game. Visit all 3 rooms. Listen, watch, wait, then the house might let you go. Or it keeps you, and someone else has to play to get you out. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. I heard footsteps from the watching room. In the mirrors, the figures were moving, coming closer. "Run," Sarah whispered. "Don't let them see you seeing them. Find the waiting room. Wait until the house is satisfied. Then maybe we can both go home." I ran, back through the impossible door, through the listening room with its whispering walls, out into the pantry. I slammed the panel shut, pressed the spots randomly until I heard the locks engage. My heart was trying to escape my chest. My hands shook so badly I could barely stand. From upstairs, I heard movement. Footsteps that weren't Grandma's. Too small, too light. Sarah was out. After 70 years, Sarah was out of the waiting room. But if she was out, what had taken her place? I found Grandma in the kitchen the next morning, making breakfast like nothing had happened. But her hands shook as she flipped the pancakes and she wouldn't meet my eyes. "She's upstairs," Grandma said quietly. "In your room. She remembers us now." I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The door to the guest room was open. Inside, sitting on the bed, was an old woman. Not the 4-year-old I'd seen in that impossible hallway. An old woman with eyes that had seen too much waiting. "You must be Mia," she said. Her voice was young and old at the same time. "Mother told me about you, only she was younger then. Or I was. Time doesn't work right in the waiting room. Sarah, how?" 70 years I waited. 70 years in a room where minutes are days and days are seconds. I watched myself grow old and fast forward and reverse. I waited for someone to play the game, to take my place. She looked at her wrinkled hands. "But you didn't finish, did you? You ran." My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means the game is still going. The house is still hungry, and until someone finishes what you started. She trailed off, looking at the wall, looking through it. They're getting restless. The ones in the rooms. They want out too. Over the next 3 days, things got worse. The sounds from the walls grew louder. Doors opened on their own. In the mirrors, I caught glimpses of movement that wasn't mine. And the messages. They were everywhere now. Written in steam on the bathroom mirror, scratched into the paint. Spelled out in the morning coffee grounds. "Finish the game. Let us out. Your turn to wait." Grandma grew weaker, like the house was draining her. Sarah was fading too. Sometimes she was solid, sometimes I could see through her. The house hadn't fully released her. Couldn't until someone took her place. I knew what I had to do. On the 7th night, I opened the panel again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked through the listening room, through that impossible door, down the not-quite-right hallway. The watching room was waiting. I stepped inside. The mirrors showed me everything. Every secret the house had collected. Every person who'd played the game and lost. The Blackwoods, who built the rooms as part of some bargain I couldn't understand. Others who'd lived here between them and my grandparents. All trapped in reflections, watching eternally. "Your turn," they whispered in unison. I forced myself to stay, to watch, to see. The mirrors showed me truths I didn't want to know, showed me lies I'd told myself, showed me futures that might be and pasts that never were. I watched until my eyes burned, until I couldn't tell which reflection was really me. Then, when I thought I couldn't take any more, a new door appeared. The way to the waiting room. The waiting room was small, just a chair and a window that looked out onto nothing. A place outside of time. I sat in the chair and immediately understood why Sarah had aged. Time moved differently here. Sideways, backwards, in circles. I was every age I'd ever been and would be, all at once. I waited. I waited while the house tested me, while it whispered offers and threats, while it showed me everyone I'd leave behind if I stayed, while it promised me powers if I served it. I waited through seconds that lasted hours, and hours that passed in blinks. And then, finally, when I thought I'd been there forever and no time at all, the door opened. Not Sarah, not Grandma, someone new, a man in a suit that looked official. "Miss Harrison, I'm from the State Historical Society. We've had reports of unauthorized modifications to a historically significant property." I blinked. I was in the basement. The regular basement. The blueprints were in my hands. What? "These rooms." He tapped the blueprints. "They were never supposed to be sealed. They're part of the original historical record. The Blackwood rooms are famous in certain circles. Tourist attraction, you know, ghost tours and such. Your grandparents had no right to wall them off." My head spun. "But the rooms, they're dangerous." He laughed. "Dangerous? They're just rooms, miss. Empty rooms with some old graffiti, though I'll admit the stories about them are quite creative. Helps sell tickets. Now, we'll need to schedule the restoration." I looked at the blueprints. They looked different now, normal, just rooms with normal names. The listening room was labeled music room. The watching room said observatory. The waiting room read study. Had I imagined it all? But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard Sarah and Grandma talking downstairs. Both of them. Both of them real. Both of them here. And I understood. The house had tested me. I'd played the game, and I'd won. Not by tricking it or defeating it, but by waiting it out. By showing it patience. The waiting room had wanted someone who could wait without breaking, and I had. The rooms were still there, would always be there. But they were satisfied now. Fed. The house would sleep for a while. But houses are patient things. They outlive their owners. They remember everything. And somewhere in another town, someone else is finding blueprints. Blueprints that show rooms that shouldn't exist. The game continues. It always continues. And if you're listening to this late at night, in a house you thought you knew, maybe go check your walls. Count your rooms. Make sure the number matches. Because once you know about the rooms that were never built, they know about you too. And they're very patient. Did you check your walls yet? Are you sure you know your own home? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever found a room that wasn't supposed to be there? Ever heard sounds from spaces that should be solid? The house wants to know, and so do I. Subscribe if you dare, because this is just one house's story. There are others, so many others. And next time, the rooms might not be so patient. Sleep tight if you can. Story number 3. They say Interstate 50 through Nevada is the loneliest road in America. But I know that's not true. The loneliest road is the one you find yourself on at 2:47 a.m. when your gas gauge hovers near empty and the last sign of civilization was a flickering billboard advertising a casino that closed down in 1987. That's when you see it. The soft neon glow cutting through the darkness like a promise. Like salvation. The Moonlight Diner. But here's the thing about promises made in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes they're meant to be broken. If you're still listening after this, if you make it to the end of what I'm about to tell you, I need you to do something for me. Leave a comment. Tell me if you've seen it too, because I can't be the only one. I can't be. The story begins now. My name is Jake Morrison, and 3 weeks ago I was just another long-haul trucker making the Phoenix to Reno run. 26 years old, divorced, no kids, just me and 18 wheels of American steel eating up miles of asphalt. I'd driven that stretch of highway maybe 100 times. Desert on both sides, nothing but sagebrush and the occasional roadkill. You learn to appreciate the monotony after a while. It becomes comfortable. That night was different, though. Storm clouds had been building all day, turning the sky the color of old motor oil. No rain yet, just that heavy electric feeling that makes your teeth ache. I'd left Phoenix later than planned. Mechanical trouble at the depot. Should have stayed overnight, but I had a deadline to meet in Reno. Casinos don't wait for their liquor shipments. The radio kept cutting in and out, static mixed with fragments of talk shows and country music. I tried scanning through the stations, but it was like the airwaves themselves were dying out here. Just me, the road, and that oppressive sky pressing down like a lid on a pot. That's when I saw it. At first, just a smudge of light on the horizon. Could have been anything. A rest stop, maybe a gas station. But as I got closer, the neon resolved into something I'd never seen before on this stretch. A diner, chrome and glass gleaming under pink and blue neon that spelled out Moonlight Diner, open 24 hours. I checked my GPS. Nothing. According to the screen, I was still 40 miles from the next exit, surrounded by empty desert. But there it was, as real as the steering wheel in my hands. A perfectly preserved 1950 S-style diner, complete with a gravel parking lot and everything. My fuel gauge read a quarter tank, enough to make it to Reno if I pushed it, but when you've been driving for 6 hours straight, when your back aches and your eyes burn, when a cup of coffee sounds like heaven itself, you don't ask too many questions. I pulled into the lot. 2 other vehicles were already there. A dusty pickup truck with Nevada plates and a sedan that looked like it had seen better days. Normal enough, the gravel crunched under my boots as I climbed down from the cab. The air smelled wrong somehow, like copper pennies and burnt sugar. The diner's door chimed when I pushed it open. Classic checkerboard floor, red vinyl booths, chrome stools along a counter. A Wurlitzer jukebox in the corner played something slow and sad. Patsy Cline, maybe. The kind of music that makes you think about everyone you've ever lost. "Coffee, hun?" The waitress appeared beside me like she'd materialized from thin air. 50-something, bleached blonde hair piled high, name tag reading Dolores. Her smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. But truck stops and diners, you meet all kinds. I'd learned not to judge. Yeah, coffee would be great. Menu? She slid a laminated menu across the counter as I settled onto a stool. The vinyl creaked under my weight. Behind the counter, I could see into the kitchen through the service window. Steam rose from the grill, but I couldn't see a cook. The menu was standard diner fare: burgers, eggs, pie. Prices that seemed frozen in time. $1.50 for a cheeseburger. Even for a hole-in-the-wall place, that was dirt cheap. My stomach growled. When had I last eaten? Phoenix seemed like days ago, not hours. "I'll take the burger special," I said. "Medium rare." Dolores' smile widened impossibly further. "Coming right up, sugar." She disappeared into the kitchen. No calling out the order, no writing it down, just gone. I sipped my coffee and looked around. The 2 other customers sat in opposite corners of the diner. The man in the first booth, mid-40s, John Deere cap, staring at a plate of eggs that looked like they'd gone cold hours ago. He hadn't touched them, just stared. The woman in the back booth was younger, maybe early 30s. Business clothes wrinkled like she'd been driving all night. She had a slice of pie in front of her. Apple, from the looks of it. But she wasn't eating either, just pushing it around her plate with her fork, creating patterns in the filling. The jukebox clicked and whirred, changing songs. Now it was Elvis. Heartbreak Hotel. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. "Here you go, hun." The burger appeared in front of me. Dolores was back, still smiling that unsettling smile. The burger looked perfect. Too perfect. Like a photograph from a 1950s advertisement. The fries were golden, steaming, arranged just so. Even the pickle on the side gleamed with an unnatural sheen. I picked up the burger and took a bite. It tasted like nothing. Not bad, not good, just absence. Like my taste buds had suddenly forgotten how to work. I chewed mechanically, swallowed, took another bite, same nothing. The fries were identical. Texture without flavor, substance without essence. "Everything okay, sugar?" Dolores hovered nearby, that smile never wavering. "Yeah, it's fine." What else could I say? That her food tasted like cardboard? That something about this whole place felt fundamentally wrong? I forced myself to eat half the burger, then push the plate away. "Just the check, please." "Oh, no rush, hun. Stay as long as you like. We're always here." She drifted away again, leaving me with my tasteless coffee and a growing sense of unease. I needed to leave, get back on the road, put miles between me and this place. I pulled out my wallet, left a 20 on the counter, more than enough to cover the meal and a generous tip. As I stood to leave, the man in the John Deere cap looked up. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw something there that made my blood run cold. Terror. Pure, crystallized terror. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the jukebox, but I could read them clearly enough. "Don't come back." I practically ran for the door. Behind me, I heard Dolores call out cheerfully, "Y'all come back now. Here, we're always open." The bell chimed again as I burst into the parking lot. The desert air had never tasted so good. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and peeled out of there like the devil himself was on my tail. In the rearview mirror, the Moonlight Diner's neon sign flickered once, twice, and then vanished completely, like it had never been there at all. Just empty highway stretching into the darkness. I made it to Reno without stopping again. Delivered my load, caught a few hours of sleep in the cab, then started the return trip to Phoenix. Broad daylight this time. I told myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Highway hypnosis, maybe. Too many hours staring at asphalt. Not enough sleep. These things happened. But when I reached that stretch of road, that exact spot where the diner had been, I slowed down, pulled onto the shoulder, got out and walked around. Nothing but desert scrub and a rusted mile marker. No sign that anything had ever been there. No foundation, no utility poles, not even tire tracks in the sand. I drove home, tried to forget about it, but over the next week things started to change. Food lost its taste. Not just some food, all food. Everything tasted like that burger. Like nothing, like absence. I went to my doctor, convinced I'd had a stroke or something. Tests came back normal. "Probably stress," he said. "Take a vacation." But it wasn't stress. I knew what it was. The diner had taken something from me, and the only way to get it back was to return. 2 weeks after my first visit, I found myself on that highway again. Different load this time, electronics bound for Vegas. But I'd planned my route carefully. Timed it so I'd hit that stretch of road right around 3 a.m. Part of me hoped I'd dreamed it all. Part of me prayed the diner wouldn't be there. But the bigger part, the part that hadn't tasted anything in 14 days, that part needed it to be real. At 2:58 a.m., I saw the glow on the horizon. The Moonlight Diner materialized out of the darkness like a ship emerging from fog. Same neon, same chrome and glass, same gravel parking lot. But this time, there were more cars. 5. No, 6 vehicles scattered across the lot. Different makes and models, but something about them seemed familiar. I parked and went inside. The bell chimed its hollow welcome. Dolores stood behind the counter like she'd been waiting for me specifically. "Well, look who's back. I knew you couldn't stay away, sugar. None of them can." The diner was more crowded this time. Every booth had someone in it. The man in the John Deere cap was still there, still staring at those same cold eggs. The businesswoman, too, her pie now a congealed mess of brown apple and broken crust. But there were others now. A teenage kid in a Letterman jacket from a high school I didn't recognize. An elderly woman knitting something shapeless and gray. A trucker like me. his hands wrapped around a coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to reality. The usual?" Dolores asked, already pouring coffee. No. I just want to know what you did to me. Why can't I taste anything anymore?" Her smile faltered for just a second. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not quite human, not quite anything I could name. "Oh, hun. You can't taste anything out there because you left a part of yourself here. Happens to everyone who eats at the moonlight. We're collectors, you might say. Little pieces of people who pass through. That's insane. Is it?" She leaned across the counter and I smelled that copper and burnt sugar scent again, stronger now. "Look around, Sugar. Really look." I did. And that's when I noticed what I'd missed before. The teenage kid's Letterman jacket. The year on it was 1987. The elderly woman's knitting needles clicked and clacked, but the yarn never seemed to get any longer. The trucker's coffee mug. Steam rose from it constantly, but I'd been watching him for 5 minutes and he'd never taken a sip. "They're all stuck," I whispered. "Not stuck, hun. Visiting. They come back every night trying to reclaim what they left behind. Some have been coming for years, decades even. That boy there? Star quarterback until he stopped at the wrong diner one night in the 87. Now he can't feel anything. No pain, no pleasure, no sensation at all. Except when he's here." My hands shook. "How do I get it back?" "My taste?" "Oh, that's easy, Sugar. Just got to make a trade. Give us something else, take back what you lost. It's only fair." "What kind of something else?" Dolores's smile returned full force. "Well, now, that depends on how much you want it back. Could be something small, a memory, maybe. That first kiss, your mama's laugh, the smell of rain on hot asphalt, or something bigger. Your ambition, your fear, your ability to love." No, I'm leaving." I stood up, but my legs felt weak. The other patrons had all turned to look at me now. The businessman's pie-stained fork hung suspended in midair. The elderly woman's knitting needles had stopped their endless clicking. Even the John Deere man had looked up from his eggs. "You'll be back," Dolores said conversationally. "They always come back. Where else can you go when the whole world tastes like ash? When food is just texture, drinks are just wetness? How long before you're willing to trade anything, everything, just to taste your morning coffee again?" I stumbled toward the door. Behind me, the jukebox started up again. Roy Orbison this time. In dreams. The bell chimed as I yanked the door open, but just before I left, I heard the teenage boy speak. His voice was hollow, decades of emptiness carved into every word. "I traded my fear. Thought I was being clever. Can't feel afraid anymore. Can't feel afraid of anything. Do you know what it's like to drive 100 miles an hour toward a brick wall and feel nothing? To stand on the edge of a cliff and have your heart beat steady as a metronome? Fear keeps us alive, man. Without it..." He trailed off, returning his attention to whatever meal had sat in front of him since Reagan was president. I lasted 3 more days. 3 days of water that tasted like nothing. 3 days of forcing down food that might as well have been cardboard. 3 days of watching cooking shows and restaurant commercials like some kind of masochist, trying to remember what a medium-rare steak was supposed to taste like. My ex-wife called on day 2, said I sounded different. Flat. Oh, I told her I was fine, just tired from the long hauls, but I could hear the concern in her voice. We'd been divorced for 2 years, but she still knew me better than anyone. Knew when something was really wrong. "Jake, maybe you should take a break. Visit your sister in Colorado, get some mountain air." Yeah, maybe. But we both knew I wouldn't. Couldn't. Because somewhere out there on Highway 50, the Moonlight Diner was waiting, and it had something that belonged to me. I did research, spent hours on truck stop forums and paranormal websites looking for anyone else who'd experienced something similar. Found scattered mentions, always secondhand. My buddy knew a guy who, or heard about this trucker who, never direct accounts, never anyone willing to use their real name, except one. A post from 3 years ago on an obscure forum for long-haul truckers. Username, DesertRat62. Don't know if anyone will believe this, but I need to tell someone. There's a diner out on Highway 50 through Nevada. Appears at night, usually between 2 and 4 a.m. Only when you're alone, only when you're desperate. Ate there once. Worst mistake of my life. They take something from you. Something you don't even realize is gone until you're back in the real world. For me, it was color. Everything's gray now. Doctors say my eyes are fine, but I know better. The diner has my color, and every night I think about going back, trading something else to get it back. But what happens when you've traded everything? When there's nothing left to give? Don't stop at the Moonlight Diner, just don't. I tried to message DesertRat62. Account had been inactive for 2 years. On the third night, I couldn't take it anymore. I got in my truck, not hauling anything this time, just driving. Told myself I was just going for a ride, clear my head, but I knew where I was heading. The moment I turned the key, I knew. The highway was empty. Weather reports had warned about a storm system moving through, and smart drivers had either pushed through earlier or waited it out. But I wasn't feeling particularly smart. The first drops of rain hit my windshield around midnight. By 2 a.m., it was a full-on downpour. The kind that turns the road into a river and makes you feel like you're driving underwater. Perfect weather for bad decisions. At 3:17 a.m., through the sheets of rain, I saw it. The neon glow was muted by the weather, but unmistakable. The Moonlight Diner, waiting for me like an old friend, or an old enemy. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. The parking lot was flooded, water ankle-deep in places, but I sloshed through it, drawn by the promise of, what? Getting my taste back? Or just ending the emptiness one way or another. The bell chimed. Water dripped from my clothes onto the checkerboard floor. The diner was packed this time. Every booth, every stool at the counter, all the familiar faces, John Deere cap, businesswoman, Letterman jacket kid, but dozens of others too. Different eras, judging by their clothes. Different decades of the lost and the trading. Jake. Dolores's voice cut through the murmur of conversations that weren't quite conversations. We've been expecting you, hun. Got your booth all ready. She led me to a corner booth. Red vinyl that squeaked under my wet jeans. A menu already waiting, though we both knew I wouldn't need it. Through the rain-streaked window, I could see my truck in the parking lot. It looked impossibly far away, like it belonged to a different world. So, Dolores said, sliding into the booth across from me. Ready to make a deal? I want to know something first. What are you? What is this place? She tilted her head, considering. You ever hear those pitcher plants, sugar? The ones that smell all sweet, attract the flies? Flies come for the nectar, but once they're inside, they can't climb back out. Eventually, they stop trying. Accept their fate. Some even seem to enjoy it, floating there in the digestive juices. That's not an answer. Isn't it? She signaled to someone behind the counter. A moment later, a steaming mug of coffee appeared in front of me. Go on. Try it. I picked up the mug. The heat was there, the weight, the steam carrying that rich coffee scent. But I knew before it touched my lips. Nothing. Hot water pretending to be coffee. It's not the coffee that's wrong, Dolores said. It's you. You're incomplete now, missing a piece. Like trying to see color with a black and white TV. The signal's all there, but you don't have the right equipment to process it anymore. So, give it back. Can't give back what's been digested, hun, but I can trade you for it. What are you willing to lose? I thought about the forum post. The man who'd lost his color, the kid who'd traded his fear. What would I become if I started down that path? How many pieces could a person lose before they stopped being a person at all? Show me someone who's made multiple trades, I said. I want to see what happens. Dolores's smile faltered slightly. You sure about that, sugar? Some things, once seen. Show me. She stood, gestured for me to follow. We walked past the other booths, the other patrons. None of them looked up. We pushed through a door marked Employees Only that I hadn't noticed before. Beyond it, a narrow hallway lit by bare bulbs. The walls were covered in photographs, Polaroids, mostly, hundreds of them. Our regular customers, Dolores said. The ones who keep coming back. I looked closer. Each photo showed a person sitting in a booth at the diner, but there was something wrong with them. The first few looked normal enough. Tired travelers, truckers, salesmen. But as we moved down the hallway, the photos changed. The people in them became less. Their eyes grew flatter, their expressions more vacant. Some were barely recognizable as human anymore, just shapes and clothes going through the motions. This one, Dolores pointed to a photo near the end of the hall, started out trading his sense of smell. Seemed harmless enough. Came back a month later, traded his ability to feel temperature. Then his memories of his children. Then his empathy. Then his ability to recognize faces. Now, the last photo in the sequence showed something that might have been a man once. It sat in a booth, hands folded on the table. But its face was smooth, featureless, except for the vague suggestion of eyes and a mouth. Like someone had started to erase a drawing but stopped halfway through. He still comes every night, Dolores said quietly. Orders the same thing. Sits in the same booth, but I'm not sure he remembers why anymore. Not sure he remembers anything. My stomach churned. Why? Why do this? We don't make anyone come here, sugar. We don't force anyone to trade, we just exist. A place for the desperate, the ones who've lost something and can't live without it. We're not evil, we're just hungry. And you're all so willing to feed us. We walked back to the main diner. The faceless thing from the photo was there, sitting in a middle booth. Up close, it was worse. It breathed, moved, went through the motions of being human. But there was nothing behind those shadow eyes, nothing at all. Last chance, Dolores said. Walk out now, learn to live without taste. It's not the worst thing. People adapt, or make a small trade, just one. Get back what you lost and never return. I looked around the diner, at all the people who'd said just one trade. At John Deere Cap, who I now realized had been here since at least the early 90s, based on the calendar visible in the kitchen. At the businesswoman, whose clothes had styles that went in and out of fashion while she sat there, pushing pie around her plate. What did you trade? I asked the Letterman jacket kid as we passed his booth. He looked up at me with eyes decades older than his face. First time? My fear, like I said. Second time, my ability to sleep. Figured I didn't need it. Sleep just meant nightmares anyway. Third time. He laughed, a sound like grinding glass. Third time I traded my ability to die. Seemed clever at the time. Now I get to sit here forever, watching people like you make the same mistakes. Unable to warn them properly because I also traded my... He frowned, searching for a word that no longer existed in his vocabulary. Compassion, Dolores supplied helpfully. He traded his compassion on visit number 4. I sat back down in my booth. The coffee had gone cold, but it wouldn't have mattered anyway. Outside, the rain had intensified. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the empty desert beyond the diner's windows. In those brief moments of brightness, I thought I saw shapes out there. Other buildings, maybe, or things that used to be buildings. A whole town of places like this, feeding on the desperate and the lost. I need to think, I said. Take all the time you need, hun. We're open 24 hours. Dolores stood to leave, then paused. Oh, one more thing. You might want to check your phone." I pulled out my cell. 12 missed calls. 3 from my ex-wife, the rest from my dispatcher. A text from Karen, my ex. "Jake, where are you? Your sister called. Said you haven't returned her calls in days. We're worried." Days? I'd left that evening, hadn't I? The timestamp on her text said it had been sent 3 days ago. "Time moves differently here," Dolores said, reading my expression. "The longer you stay, the more it stretches. Some of our regulars have been here for years in outside time. In here, maybe a few months from their perspective. It's a mercy, really. Imagine knowing you'd lost decades to a single night's bad decision." I stood up abruptly. "I'm leaving." "If you say so, sugar." I headed for the door, but my legs felt like lead. Each step was harder than the last. The other patrons watched me now with something like pity in their eyes. Those who still had pity to feel. The bell above the door seemed impossibly far away. 10 feet from the door, I stopped. Not because I wanted to, but because I literally couldn't move forward anymore. My body simply refused to obey. "Oh, did I forget to mention?" Dolores appeared beside me. "Once you've eaten here twice, leaving gets complicated. Your body knows where it belongs now, with us. With the parts of you we're keeping safe." "Safe?" I managed to gasp out. "Of course. We take excellent care of what's given to us. Your sense of taste is perfectly preserved, experiencing every meal you've ever enjoyed on endless loop. Much better than letting it waste away out there in the world, don't you think?" I tried to push forward again. Made it another 2 feet before my knees buckled. The Letterman jacket kid watched from his booth, that ancient expression on his young face. "There's a trick to it," he called out. "You have to really want to leave. More than you want what you lost. More than you fear what's out there. Most of us, we can't manage it. The want isn't strong enough." I thought about Karen. About my sister in Colorado who was apparently worried about me. About the life I had outside this place. Empty of taste, maybe, but still a life. Still real. Not this fluorescent purgatory of endless night and hollow people. One more step, then another. My hand touched the door handle. "Last chance for a trade," Dolores called out. "Once you leave like this, forcing your way out, you can never come back. The diner won't appear for you again. What you've lost stays lost forever." Forever? No taste for the rest of my life? Every meal a chore, every drink just wetness. Could I live like that? Could I survive knowing that salvation was just a single trade away, but forever out of reach? My hand tightened on the handle. In the reflection of the glass door, I could see myself, and I almost didn't recognize the man staring back. Hollow-eyed, desperate, already halfway to becoming like them. Like the things in the booths who'd traded away pieces of themselves until there was nothing left to trade. I yanked the door open. The bell chimed one last time. A mournful sound, like disappointment. The cold rain hit me like a slap, shocking me back to full awareness. I stumbled into the parking lot, fumbling for my truck keys. Behind me, I heard Dolores call out one last time. "Don't forget us, Jake. We'll always remember you." The truck started on the 3rd try. I threw it in reverse, not caring about the flooding, about the mud, about anything except putting distance between me and that place. In the rearview mirror, the diner's neon began to flicker. I watched as it faded, not all at once, but slowly, like a dream dissolving upon waking. The last thing to go was Dolores's face in the window, still smiling that too wide smile. Then, nothing, just empty highway and rain. I drove straight through to Phoenix, 15 hours stopping only for gas. When I finally made it home, I slept for 2 days straight. When I woke up, 5 days had passed since I'd left for what I thought would be a simple overnight run. My dispatcher had filed a missing person report. My ex-wife was on her way from California. I never told them the truth. How could I? said I'd had a breakdown, pulled off the road to sleep, lost track of time. They arranged for me to see a therapist. I went, talked about stress and divorce and all the normal things that break people. Never mentioned the diner. It's been 3 weeks now. The taste hasn't come back. The doctors have run every test they can think of. MRIs, blood work, neurological exams. Everything comes back normal. Psychosomatic, they say. It might resolve on its own with time and therapy. But I know better. Somewhere out there on Highway 50, the Moonlight Diner is still serving its empty meals to its hollow customers. Part of me is still there, locked away in whatever passes for storage in that place, experiencing every good meal I've ever had, while I'm here choking down tasteless food and trying to pretend everything's fine. And late at night when I can't sleep, I think about the faceless thing in the photograph, about how it started with just one trade, one small compromise. I tell myself I made the right choice, that living with emptiness is better than becoming emptiness. But sometimes when I'm driving late at night and I see a glow on the horizon that might be a rest stop or might be something else, sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough to drive past, or if one day the hunger for what I've lost will outweigh everything else. The Letterman jacket kid was right about one thing: fear keeps us alive. And I'm terrified that someday I'll stop being afraid of what I might become. If you made it this far, if you're still listening, I need to know I'm not alone. Leave a comment. Tell me about the times you've driven late at night and seen things that shouldn't be there. Tell me about the choices you've made when you were desperate. Tell me I did the right thing, because on nights like tonight when everything tastes like ash and the highway calls to me like a siren song, on nights like tonight I'm not sure I did. And if you ever find yourself on Highway 50 through Nevada, driving alone through the desert night, and you see a neon glow where no light should be, just keep driving. No matter how tired you are, no matter how hungry, no matter what you think you need, just keep driving. Some doors, once opened, can never really be closed again, and some hungers can never truly be satisfied. They just teach you to be hungry for more. Story number 4. The smell hit me first. Not the usual city stench of garbage and exhaust fumes, but something else. Something wet and organic that made my stomach turn. I was standing at the corner of 5th and Main, right where the old Woolworths used to be when I heard it. A voice, coming from beneath the street. Please, help me. 3 words that would change everything. 3 words that would lead me into the darkest secret our city has ever kept. And before you think this is just another urban legend, I have proof, I have recordings, and after tonight you'll understand why I can never walk past a storm drain again without feeling my heart race. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what really lives beneath our feet, and why you should be very, very careful the next time it rains. The story begins now. My name is Marcus Chen, and I worked for the Seattle Public Utilities Department. Specifically, I was part of the storm drain maintenance crew. Not the most glamorous job, I know, but it paid well, had good benefits, and most days were pretty routine. Check the grates, clear debris, make sure water flows properly. Simple stuff. That Tuesday started like any other. October rain was coming down steady. Not hard, just that persistent northwest drizzle that soaks through everything. I was doing my rounds downtown, marking problem areas on my tablet. The city had received complaints about flooding near the old shopping district, so I was checking each drain methodically. The intersection of 5th and Main always gave us trouble. Something about the way the old pipes connected. They dated back to the 1920s, and despite numerous patches and repairs, water tended to back up there during heavy rains. As I knelt beside the drain, shining my flashlight through the grate, I noticed something odd. The water wasn't flowing right. Instead of the usual steady stream heading toward the treatment plant, it was pulsing, like something was blocking it intermittently. I made a note on my tablet and was about to move on when I heard it. "Please, help me." I froze. The voice was faint, distorted by the echo of the pipes, but unmistakably human. Female, I thought, young. My first instinct was to call 911. Someone must have fallen in. Though how that was possible through these narrow grates I couldn't imagine. But as I reached for my phone, the voice came again. "Down here, please." This time, I was certain it came from the drain. I pressed my face against the cold metal grate, angling my flashlight to see better. The beam penetrated maybe 10 feet into the darkness before being swallowed up. Nothing but black water and concrete. "Hello?" I called down. "Are you hurt? I'm calling for help." Silence. Just the sound of water trickling and distant traffic. I waited, counting my heartbeats. 10 seconds, 20, then, "No police, please, just you." Something in that voice made my skin crawl. It wasn't just fear. There was something else. Something wrong about the way the words formed, like someone learning to speak for the first time. I should have called for backup, should have followed protocol. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and I'd always been too curious for my own good. Besides, I told myself, if someone was really hurt down there, every second counted. The nearest maintenance access was half a block away, hidden behind a chain-link fence in an alley. I had the keys, of course, part of the job. The metal door was heavy, rusted at the edges despite regular maintenance. It groaned as I pulled it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. I clipped my flashlight to my vest and started down. The rungs were slippery with condensation, and the smell got worse with every foot I descended. Not just sewage, but something organic and wrong. Like meat left in the sun. The ladder ended at a narrow walkway running alongside the main drain tunnel. The ceiling was just high enough for me to stand upright, though I had to duck occasionally where pipes crossed overhead. Water rushed past in the channel to my right, carrying leaves and trash toward the treatment plant. "Hello?" I called again, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Where are you?" "This way. Follow the water." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I started walking, following the maintenance path deeper into the system. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, revealing decades of graffiti, mineral deposits, and something else. Scratches in the concrete. Deep gouges that looked almost like claw marks. I'd been in these tunnels before, but never this deep, never alone. The maintenance crews usually worked in pairs for safety reasons. Reasons that were becoming increasingly clear to me. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the voice kept calling. "Almost there. Please, hurry." The tunnel branched ahead. According to the maps I'd memorized, the left path led to the newer sections installed in the 60s. The right path, that led to the old system. The original tunnels from when Seattle was first built. We weren't supposed to go there. Structural integrity issues, they said. Dangerous conditions. The voice came from the right. I hesitated at the junction, playing my light down both passages. The left looked normal. Modern concrete, relatively clean. The right was different. Older brick construction with a curved ceiling like a cathedral, and the smell. It was definitely coming from there. "Please." The voice was weaker now, more desperate. Against every shred of common sense, I turned right. The old tunnel was like stepping back in time. The bricks were hand-laid, each one precisely placed by workers who'd been dead for a century. My footsteps echoed differently here. Hollow, almost musical. The maintenance walkway was narrower, and in some places, it had crumbled entirely, forcing me to edge along what remained. The scratches on the walls were more numerous here, deeper, and they formed patterns, almost like writing, though no alphabet I recognized. My flashlight beam caught something glinting ahead, metal. As I got closer, I realized it was a shopping cart, twisted and mangled, wedged into the channel. How it got this deep into the system I couldn't imagine. Then I saw the bones. Not human. At least I didn't think so. They were scattered around the cart, picked clean and white. Too big to be rats, too small to be human. Maybe dogs? Cats? I didn't want to think about it too hard. You came. The voice was right behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly fell into the channel. My flashlight beam swept the tunnel, revealing nothing. Just darkness and dripping water. "Where are you?" My voice cracked. I wasn't proud of it, but fear was creeping up my spine like cold fingers. Here. Always here. Movement in my peripheral vision. I turned again, and this time I saw her. Or what I thought was her. A shape in the water, pale and indistinct. Human-sized, but wrong somehow. The proportions were off, like someone had tried to draw a person from memory and gotten the details mixed up. She was standing in the channel, water rushing around her legs. If they were legs. The current should have knocked her over, but she stood perfectly still, watching me with eyes that reflected my flashlight like a cat's. "Help me," she said, and I realized her mouth wasn't moving. The voice was coming from somewhere else, everywhere else. The tunnel itself seemed to speak. What are you?" She tilted her head, a motion too fluid, too boneless to be natural. "Lonely," she said. "So lonely. Stay with me?" Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. Every urban legend about things in the sewers. Alligators were the least of our worries, apparently. I can't. I have to go. People will look for me." "No," she said, and took a step forward. The water didn't splash. It parted around her like she wasn't really there. They never look, never find. So many down here, so many friends. That's when I saw them. The walls weren't covered in scratches. They were covered in names, hundreds of them carved into the brick. Some old, worn smooth by time, others fresh, still sharp-edged. And at the bottom, in letters still damp with brick dust, "Help me." I backed away, my heel catching on a broken piece of walkway. I stumbled, caught myself, and when I looked back, she was closer. Much closer. Close enough that I could see her face, or what passed for one. Features that shifted and blurred like smoke, never quite settling into anything recognizable as human. "Stay," she whispered, and her voice was multiple voices now. Male, female, young, old, a chorus of the lost. "Join us. No more loneliness, no more pain, just the dark and the water and the waiting." I ran. Not proud of it, but I ran like I'd never run before. Back through the old tunnel, slipping on wet brick, bouncing off walls in my panic. Behind me, I heard her. Them. Following. Not footsteps, but a sound like rushing water that moved against the current. I reached the junction and turned left toward the newer section. Toward safety. My lungs burned, and my flashlight beam jumped crazily as I sprinted. The ladder. I just had to reach the ladder. There. The maintenance access. I grabbed the rungs and hauled myself up, not caring that my hands were slipping, not caring that I banged my knee hard enough to see stars. I could hear them below, a sound like a drain backing up, like water trying to flow upward. I burst out of the access door and slammed it shut, fumbling with my keys to lock it. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries. When the lock finally clicked home, I backed away, breathing hard. From below, muffled by metal and concrete, I heard the voice one more time. "You'll be back. They always come back." I didn't report what happened. How could I? "Hey, boss, there's some kind of shape-shifting water creature in the old tunnels that collects people." They'd have had me drug-tested and fired before lunch. Instead, I called in sick for the rest of the week. Told them I'd eaten some bad Thai food, spent my days in bed trying to convince myself I'd imagined it all. Stress, maybe, or some kind of gas leak down there causing hallucinations. There had to be a rational explanation, but I couldn't stop thinking about those names on the walls, hundreds of them. How long had this been going on? And more importantly, why hadn't anyone noticed? I started researching. Spent hours at the library going through old newspapers looking for patterns, missing persons reports, unexplained disappearances, and I found them. God, I found so many. 1928. 3 workers vanished during storm drain construction. Never found. 1945, Mary Patterson, age 19, last seen near 5th and Main during heavy rain. 1963. Robert Kim utilities worker doesn't return from routine maintenance. 1987. Group of teenage urban explorers enter storm drains. 2 never emerge. The list went on. Always during rain. Always near the old sections of the system. And always the investigations went nowhere. People just vanished. I found something else, too. City planning documents from the 1920s. The original storm drain system wasn't just built for water management. There were references to accommodation of pre-existing structures and incorporation of native geological features. Bureaucratic language that seemed to be dancing around something. Then I found the map. It was hand-drawn, tucked into a surveyor's journal from 1922. It showed the planned drain system overlaid on what was already there. And what was already there wasn't natural. Tunnels that predated the city. Chambers too regular to be caves. And at the center, right beneath 5th and Main, a large circular room marked only with a symbol I didn't recognize and a single word: occupied. They built the storm drains around something that was already there, something that had been there long before Seattle existed. I should have left it alone. Should have requested a transfer to a different department, moved to a different city, forgotten everything. But I kept thinking about those names on the walls, those people who were never found. Were they still down there? Still alive somehow? And then the dreams started. Every night, the same thing. I was back in the tunnels, but they were different. Older, the walls were carved stone instead of brick, covered in that same strange writing. And she was there, always just out of sight, calling to me. "Come back, Marcus, your friends are waiting. We're all waiting." I'd wake up soaked in sweat, the taste of stagnant water in my mouth. My apartment started to smell like the tunnels. That organic, wrong smell that made my stomach turn. I'd shower for hours, but it wouldn't go away. Then the rain started again. Not the usual Seattle drizzle, but real rain. The kind that floods streets and overwhelms the storm drains. The kind that sends utilities crews scrambling to keep the city from drowning. My phone rang at 3 a.m. My supervisor panicked. "Marcus, I know you're sick, but we need everyone. Downtown's flooding bad, the whole system's backing up." I wanted to say no, wanted to quit right there on the phone. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. "We've got reports of voices coming from the drains. Probably just echoes, but it's freaking people out. Need someone who knows the old sections." They were calling for help again, and this time, people were listening. I met the crew at 5th and Main at 4 a.m. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers. 3 other maintenance workers were already there, setting up barriers and trying to clear the grates. I recognized 2 of them, Jake and Tommy, good guys who'd been with the department for years. The third was new, a young woman named Sarah who'd just started the month before. "Marcus!" Jake waved me over. Thank God, this whole section's backed up. Water's not draining at all. I looked at the storm drain where I'd first heard the voice. Water was pooling around it, rising fast, and beneath the sound of rain and rushing water I could hear it. Faint but unmistakable. "Help? Us?" "You hear that?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside the grate. "Sounds like someone stuck down there." "Don't," I grabbed her arm, maybe too roughly. "Don't listen to it." She pulled away, frowning. "What's wrong with you? If someone's trapped..." "No one's trapped." I tried to keep my voice steady. It's just echoes, acoustic phenomena happens in the old sections. Jake was giving me a strange look. You okay, man? You look like hell. I probably did. I hadn't slept properly in days, hadn't eaten. The smell from the drains was making me nauseous. But I couldn't leave, not when I knew what was down there. We need to divert the flow, I said, trying to sound professional. Redirect through the newer sections. Stay out of the old tunnels. Can't, Tommy said, checking his tablet. New sections are already at capacity. We've got to open the old overflow channels or half of downtown's going to flood. My heart sank. The overflow channels ran right through the oldest part of the system, right past where I'd seen her. Then we do it fast, I said. In and out, nobody goes alone. Nobody listens to anything unusual. Understood? Sarah was still frowning, but Jake and Tommy nodded. They'd worked the tunnels long enough to know that sometimes you didn't ask questions. We descended through the same maintenance access I'd used before. The ladder was slick with rain, and the tunnel below was already half flooded. We moved in single file, me leading, despite every instinct screaming at me to run. The new section was chaos. Water thundered through the channels, carrying debris and garbage. We worked our way towards the junction where the manual overflow valves were located. Old technology, but reliable. Usually. Christ, Jake muttered as we reached the valves. They're stuck. The wheels that opened the overflow channels were corroded, locked in place by decades of mineral buildup. Tommy and Jake put their backs into it, but the valve wouldn't budge. There's another set, I said, my mouth dry. In the old section. Emergency backups. Then, let's go, Sarah said, already heading for the junction. Wait! But she was already around the corner, splashing into the old tunnel. We followed, because what else could we do? Leave her alone down there? The brick tunnel was exactly as I remembered, but the water was higher now, almost to the walkway. And the smell. God, it was worse. Like an opened grave. Sarah was ahead of us, her flashlight beam sweeping the walls. Hey, look at all these names. Don't read them, I said quickly. Just keep moving. But it was too late. I could see her lips moving as she traced the carved letters. And then she stopped, her whole body going rigid. Sarah? She turned slowly, and her eyes were reflecting our lights like mirrors. She says you came back, Sarah said, but it wasn't her voice. It was the voice. The multiple, impossible voice. She says you brought friends. She's so happy. The water in the channel began to move wrong, swirling against the current. Rising, and from it she emerged. The thing that looked like a woman but wasn't. The thing that had waited in the dark for God knows how long. Run, I told Jake and Tommy. Run! But the tunnel was flooding fast. Water poured in from unseen openings, rising to our knees, our waists. And in it, shapes moved. Pale things that might have been human once, reaching with 2 long arms. Tommy screamed as something grabbed his leg. Jake tried to pull him free, but more hands emerged from the water, dragging them both down. I reached for them, but Sarah, or the thing wearing Sarah's face, grabbed my arm. Stay, she said. The collection isn't complete, so many empty spaces on the walls. So many names yet to carve. I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my utility knife and slashed at the thing holding me. It let go, more in surprise than pain, black water pouring from the wound. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I ran, fighting against the rising water, lungs burning. Behind me, I could hear them. All of them. The collected. The lost. Calling me back, I reached the ladder just as the water hit the ceiling in the tunnel behind me. Climbed faster than I'd ever climbed in my life. Burst out into the rain and slammed the door shut. This time I didn't stop at locking it. I grabbed a piece of rebar from a nearby construction site and jammed it through the handle. Then another, and another, until there was no way that door was opening from either side. I called 911. Reported 3 workers trapped in flooding tunnels. They sent rescue crews, of course. Spent hours trying to get through that door, cutting through my improvised locks. When they finally made it inside, the tunnels were empty. Just water and mud and debris. They never found Jake or Tommy or Sarah. The official report blamed catastrophic flooding, suggested they'd been swept into the treatment system. Their names were added to the department's memorial wall. Heroes who died serving the city. I quit the next day, moved out of Seattle within a week, but it didn't matter. The dreams followed me. The smell followed me. And sometimes, during heavy rains, I swear I can hear them calling. Because here's the thing I realized too late. The storm drains connect everything. Every city has them, every town. A vast network of tunnels running beneath our feet, all eventually flowing to the same dark places. I'm telling you this because you need to know. When you hear voices from the drains, don't listen. When the rain floods the streets, stay inside. And if someone you know goes missing during a storm, don't look for them. They're not lost. They've been collected, and the collection is never complete. I still have the photos. The videos I took in those tunnels before my phone died. Things that shouldn't exist. Things that prove every word of this is true. But every time I think about posting them, I hear her voice. You'll be back. They always come back. She's wrong. I'll never go back. But sometimes, on rainy nights, I stand at the storm drains and listen. Listen to the voices calling up from the dark. New voices now. Jake, Tommy, Sarah. All calling for help that will never come. So, next time you're walking in the rain and you hear something from beneath the street, keep walking. Whatever you do, keep walking. Because once you stop to listen, you're already part of the collection. I thought moving to Phoenix would help. Desert city, barely any rain, minimal storm drain system. I thought I'd be safe. I was wrong. It's been 3 months since Seattle. 3 months since I lost my coworkers, my friends, to whatever lives in those tunnels. I've been working construction here, staying away from anything underground. But the dreams haven't stopped. If anything, they've gotten worse. Last night I dreamed I was back in those brick tunnels, but they were different, bigger, ancient, and filled with them. Thousands of collected souls standing in the water, perfectly still, waiting. Sarah was at the front, her eyes those terrible mirrors, and she spoke with that chorus voice. The network is vast, Marcus. Older than your cities, older than your memory. We flow beneath everything, waiting for the rain. I woke up to find my apartment flooded, not from any leak or broken pipe. The water was coming up through the drains. Clear at first, then darker, carrying that familiar organic smell. And in it, I saw shapes, faces, reaching. I ran, again, like I always do. But here's what terrifies me most. Yesterday, I saw the news. Portland, massive flooding in the tunnel system. 3 city workers missing. San Francisco, voices reported from storm drains during recent rains. 2 teenagers vanished. Los Angeles, a whole maintenance crew gone, just like Jake and Tommy and Sarah. It's spreading. Or maybe it was always everywhere. And now it's just getting hungry. I've been researching obsessively. Found references in old Native American stories about things that lived in the deep places, things that were here before humans. Found settler accounts from the 1800s about voices in the rivers, people who walked into the water and never came back. Found modern urban explorer forums full of deleted posts, accounts terminated mid-story, last entries always the same. Going back down to check something. The pattern is always identical. Voices calling for help. Kind souls who listen. And then collection. I've tried to warn people. Posted on forums, called city authorities, even reached out to reporters. But who believes the ramblings of an ex-utility worker talking about monsters in the drains? They think I'm traumatized from losing my coworkers. PTSD, they say. Survivor's guilt. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am crazy. But crazy doesn't explain the water that appears in my apartment. Doesn't explain the new names I see when I close my eyes. Names of people who haven't gone missing yet. Doesn't explain why I know, with absolute certainty, that Phoenix is about to have its first major rainfall in months. The weather report says it's impossible. High pressure system, clear skies for weeks. But I can smell it coming. That wet, organic smell that haunts me. And last night, for the first time, I heard her voice again. Not in a dream, in my apartment, coming from my bathroom drain. Marcus, the collection needs a curator, someone who understands, someone who's seen. Come home, home, as if those tunnels were ever home, as if that darkness could ever be anything but a grave. I'm leaving Phoenix tomorrow, heading to Nevada maybe, somewhere with even less water, but I know it won't matter. The network is everywhere, waiting beneath our feet. And the rain always comes eventually. I'm writing this as a warning, a final testament, because I can feel it, the pull, the call. Every night it gets stronger. Every night the water rises a little higher through my drains, and every night I have to fight a little harder not to answer. They're patient, you see, whatever they are. They've been here long before us, and they'll be here long after. They can wait. They know that everyone breaks eventually. Everyone answers the call. Even me, especially me. Because I've seen what's down there. I know the truth. And sometimes, God help me, sometimes I think it might be better than up here. No more running, no more fear, just the dark and the water and the eternal collection. If you're reading this and I've disappeared, don't look for me. You already know where I'll be. Just another name on the wall. Another voice in the chorus. Another collector, bringing others home. Now, sleep. Or at least, try to. It's quiet now, too quiet, but not empty. That feeling crawling up your spine, that weight pressing on your chest, that's not your imagination. You're not alone. There's something behind the curtain. You haven't looked, not because you forgot, but because you're afraid to know. You heard the whisper, software wet, wrong. Like breath dragged across broken glass. But you told yourself it was the wind, didn't you? That lie made you feel safe. Temporarily. Let me ask you, does the wind whisper your name? Does the wind tap lightly, again and again, from the same spot, behind the curtain, every night? Does the wind leave scratches on your window that weren't there this morning? Thin, sharp, like claws, like warnings. You don't remember opening the window. You never open the window. But it's unlocked now. You could check, you could stand up, you could walk over and pull the curtain back. But you won't, because you know. You know what's waiting, not because you've seen it, but because you felt it. In the quiet, in the dark. Every time you close your eyes, every time you wake up and your blanket is just slightly moved. Your door slightly cracked. You try to explain it. Your mind wants to explain it. But that whisper, that sound that only comes when you're alone, when everything is still, when the night is at its deepest, that's not a dream, that's a presence. It doesn't want your fear, it wants your attention. It feeds on the moment you doubt yourself. The second you wonder if you heard something, the instant your heart rate rises. That's when it leans closer. It's been patient, watching, learning you like prey. You ever notice it never shows up when the lights are on, when someone's in the room? Number. It waits for the ritual, the brushing of your teeth, the turning off of lights, the last look at your phone, the deep breath just before sleep. That's when it wakes up. That's when it stirs behind the curtain. Sometimes it watches you all night. Sometimes it moves. A shift in the shadow. A faint creak on the floorboards. The sound of fabric sliding over skin. And when you don't check, when you ignore it, that's when it comes closer. Not fast, not loud, just closer. You might feel a cold spot on the bed. You might feel breath on your neck. You might hear a whisper in your ear that sounds almost like your voice. It copies, it mimics, it blends, not to confuse you, to prepare you, because soon it won't need the curtain, it won't need shadows, it will sit beside you, stand behind you, speak through you. You won't even know when it happens. You'll wake up, look in the mirror, and something will be off. Your eyes won't blink quite right, your smile will linger too long. Your reflection will move just a little after you do. And the people around you? They'll say you seem different. Not worse, just not you. But tonight you're still you. Still in control, for now. You could still check. You could still confront it. Pull the curtain back, face it, but deep down, you've already made your choice. You won't. Because you'd rather lie still, let your eyes drift shut, and hope sleep comes quickly. And it will. But what you wake up as might not be the same. Now, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're not just a viewer, you're part of something bigger. Something that watches with you, that sits beside you as you watch, as you listen, as you wait. Because this story doesn't end when the screen fades to black. It follows you into the next room, into your dreams, into your reflection. If you liked this story, like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss the next one, so we don't miss you, and comment below. Tell us the moment you stopped feeling alone. We're watching, we're listening, and we read everything. Now, go ahead, gain the courage to check the dark corners before you sleep. Turn off the lights, close your eyes, sleep well, if you can.